At DDO last week, we had 3 very public foot faults called on the broadcast, which means there potentially were a lot more off camera in the FPO division. Natalie Ryan, Stacy Ronsley both got called on foot faults that were seconded on their card, and they were not argued about. And then there was a third one on camera during the playoff on the final approach to the green at 18. Haley King called a foot fault on Missy Gannon. And there was a little controversy on this. And I want to talk about this, actually, this specific foot fault call. There's some people saying, oh, it was a foot fault. Why was it not seconded by the marshal? Some people saying, oh, it absolutely wasn't. Why are we even calling this? There were 2 strokes ahead of Haley King. This type of foot fault call, though, I have been called on this. Nate Perkins has been called on this. If you are stepping to throw a backhand and your foot is not touching the disc or the mini, you are 99.9% good. It's called a brace for a reason, and Missy Gannon does it quite well. I watched this footage over and over again. This was not a foot fault, and I think most of the time that this call gets called, it's not a foot fault because fundamentally the pivot does not happen until the disc comes out of the hand. We are bracing against the front foot, rotating against it, releasing the disc, and then pivoting. I have a question for both of you guys. How many times has this type of foot fault been called on you, or you've seen people call this? A lot of times it's not even in the fairway. Sometimes it's off the front of a tee pad where they think the foot is pivoting off the front of the tee pad, and that's a foot fault. What do you guys think about this type of call, not necessarily the one that was called at DDO?
Well, I feel like that's not really where players who are the officials are putting their focus. I don't think players are really zooming in and going, hey, is he stepping behind his mini? Does he move his mini? Because it really doesn't have a big role to play in the shot, especially when it's a wide open fairway right there. So I felt bad for Haley that she felt the need to call it in that moment because it was a playoff. She was already down by 2, and it's not going to affect the shot. So I felt like it was a tough situation for Haley to actually call Missy in that moment, just being the only other person on the card. It's really tough to call your card mate on a foot fault.
Definitely.
Just because of the repercussion, the tension that gets built up. If you call someone on a foot fault early in the round, it becomes this awkward thing and it feels so personal. And in an ideal world, I don't think players want to have to, have that responsibility of calling their card mates. And I think a lot of players tend to just refrain from calling them. Even if they see it, they refrain from it because that tension can affect you for the rest of the round. Casey, have you ever felt that before?
Yeah, absolutely. Both directions too. Uh, I've been called on one similar on an uphill run up on hole 8 at Brewster Ridge, and neither one of I looked at both my car mates after it was called, and they said no, that's not a foot fault, so we moved on and it was fine. But like it was obviously like a new vibe on the card. But I've also been on a card where Andrew Fish called Dustin Keegan on a foot fault, but the difference was compared to like the Missy one. This is my first time seeing the Missy foot fault. Well, I mean, what was called as a foot fault apparently.
Mm-hmm.
This is my first time seeing the Missy one, and the Dustin Keegan one that I experienced was he was already on the disc, and we know that he was already on the disc because it squeaked when he pivoted. And Fish
Mm.
calls foot fault. I look down and his foot is just smack dab in the middle of his
Yeah.
disc. So I'm like, yes, I have to go with a good conscience to say that I confirm.
So to wrap this up, we have a lot more topics to talk about today. I am completely understanding that it stinks that there's a stigma around calling foot faults. And now, Haley tries to do what she thought was right in the moment and now is getting a bunch of flack from people. So
Mm-hmm.
the first thing, Haley for a while has talked about wanting to try to empower players to start not being afraid of calling these. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
totally cool with that. I mean, it opens the door for a lot more conversations and we can have more after the break about, circle one, circle two, step putting, and kind of changing the narrative of how the game is played, literally by calling these. But in this situation, I am very passionate about that type of foot fault, the pivoting into the mini, as almost never a foot fault call. If you step on the disc, like Casey was saying, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you call a foot fault. Or if you're stepping really far to the left or right, things like that. But the pivoting into the mini is not a thing. We brace against the front foot and then we throw, and that's almost entirely what happens, depending on what level of player you are.